Hello. Hey, man.
Come on.
We're going to talk about the blockchain. I've got two gentlemen that are going to join me, and hopefully we'll get some sense out of this beyond finance, not just Bitcoin. So Chris, please. And I've forgotten the other guy's name. And that is my friend, Piers. Chris and Piers, please. That's got freezing. Please. Okay, so we're not necessarily going to talk about your companies. We're going to talk about the subject, but you've got 2 minutes each to tell us who you are, what you do, what your company does, and how you're an authority on the subject. And I'll start with you, Piers.
Thank you. Hi guys, my name is Piers Ridyard. I'm the CEO of Radix, and we're building a new protocol that allows you to build decentralized applications, tokens, and assets. It's very much akin to Ethereum, the key difference being that it's massively scalable.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a product engineer at TransferWise. I'll start off by saying TransferWise is not a blockchain company. I'll leave it at that. But on the side, I did my master's thesis about security analysis of kind of putting fiat currency on the blockchain. And then also working on some education blockchain startup on the side in New York.
Okay, great. When we were talking backstage, I was trying to give examples of existing blockchains that are successful and we trust. And the first one that I used, and they didn't laugh at me, which was really good, was about the UK horse racing industry, that there are people ready to pay $2 million for a horse that's never run, based on the blockchain of all those horses that goes back 300 years. I know it sounds a bit weird. But then I said this to a guy a few weeks ago, he said, what about humanity? Humanity is the ultimate blockchain because we trust and we know and we do it. So those are what I think of the blockchains of the past. This panel was about the blockchains of the future. So beyond finance, Chris, where do we go with this awesomeness?
All right, so it's a huge question. This is why I'm most excited about blockchain. I think really it's doing something to free data. So right now data is behind closed doors. There's no necessarily any source of truth. And with blockchains, we can put data into like a shared environment that's permission, distributed, decentralized, immutable. And with this gives a lot of possibilities to kind of transact on the same data and in a way where no one really owns the data. It's on the protocol, but kind of everyone can own their access to it.
And you think it's a good thing, period?
It's like all technology. It depends how it's used.
Right.
It can be used for good.
So I keep kind of calling it true data, but it's not necessarily true data if it comes from the wrong source. Would that be right?
Yeah, so there are certain forms of truth on distributed ledger technologies that you can be absolutely certain of because of the maths and the crypto behind it, right? So you've got the cryptography, and there's a whole host of lies that you can't tell on the blockchain. You can't pretend to be someone you're not, in that if you have a public key identity and you have the private key, you can sign that and prove that you own that identity, but other people can't do that. And if the truth that is being created by the protocol, for example, that a Bitcoin has been mined and now that is owned by a miner, that's another truth that we can be absolutely certain of because it's internal. But if it's coming from an external source, then there is the possibility of corruption.
So I don't understand what external source means. You mean from the very build of the blockchain?
No, as in like if you wanted to put data onto the blockchain, you can't say that the data on the blockchain is necessarily truthful. We just got a shared version of what the data on it is.
But it's going to be there forever as well.
And it's going to be there forever, which also raises some interesting problems like GDPR and stuff like that.
No, absolutely. So beyond finance, back to you, Piers. I keep thinking you're called Darius for some reason. It's coming in my head. Darius, blockchain, Piers. In C's, Piers. What areas do you think are going to benefit from the blockchain? I mean, I keep thinking of healthcare, elections, refugee status.
Yeah.
But you're more focused on identity, right?
Yeah. So I really like identity as like a primary to build on top of, right? Because if you have this truth that I can prove I own an address on the blockchain, so like, hey, this is my public identity, and I can prove that that's mine because I have the private key, then suddenly you can build some really interesting identity concepts around it. So say that when you're born, the government issues you with a blockchain identity, which you own the private key for, and then that's your passport ID.
Is that what India's doing?
Sorry?
Is this what India is doing with this huge...
I know Estonia's doing something with identity. I'm not sure what India's doing.
But it's not a blockchain... No, okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, so once you have that primary, and I can say, this is me, and I can now attest things to it. So I can say, right, here's my passport, as in, I can then prove that that's mine, and then I can then prove that I own things because things can be written against it. You can start to do things really interesting from really basic, like you were saying, refugees.
Yeah.
You can give refugees an identity that they can then prove that they own.
Chris, you want to add something there?
Yeah, so I mean, I lived in Estonia for quite a few years, and I feel like that's the country that started really taking this idea and implementing it, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Still there, certificates are issued by the government, by the police, but your ID card is your key, your mobile SIM card is the key, and it just opens up so many possibilities when you have a strong digital identity. So I think like the S-Coin, one of their kind of factions of the S-Coin was they want to try to get this identity to be more decentralized and not tied to the Estonian government.
You hurt your head in Tallinn.
Yes, I did.
He's got a big scar on the side of his head. He knows a lot about the blockchain, but he doesn't see when taxis come around the corner. 4 stitches, was it? 3
like
stitches?
8 here.
8 stitches. Oh, welcome.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
Apart from identity, there's another kind of concept of ownership. Right, so Chris, ownership as opposed to identity, how does a blockchain kind of mitigate or change those two? What are those? What's the difference?
Ownership
ownership of, ownership of who you are as opposed to what you are.
Yeah, so let's say identity and ownership difference. So let's see, blockchain allows us a place where we can put things and agree that that's there. So it's still, we need the organizations to be able to get to the point where they put their valuable data there. But once it's there, and once you, a person, have like the identity yourself tied to that, then no one can question that. So what it allows us to do is you can put like house titles, and like you can put land ownership, you can put basically ownership of anything on the blockchain. And
you mentioned earlier about land registry in the UK, that we are actually quite a well-developed country when it comes to trust of land. We haven't been invaded for a while and all that stuff. Sure. But I've always been quite fascinated when maybe a city's been under occupation and then the families 60 years ago, I think Berlin's probably quite a good example, is that they go back and say, by the way, that's our land. Is that by definition a blockchain going to work better in a developed country than it will in a less developed country that, as you said earlier, has a kleptocracy and is maybe a malign government?
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea for places where land rights are a lot less certain. There are still places in the world where the government will come along and just say, oh, this farm is now ours, and the farmers have lived on there for generations and generations, and there's not like a piece of paper that says that they own it, and so the government can just move them on. And if we started putting those ownership rights against identities that we created, then people can prove very easily that they are the owners of that land, and hopefully that can reduce the kind of kleptocracy that can exist, or the kind of, if a government comes into power and then starts trying to take the land, they can't do it in a legitimate way or seem to be a legitimate way.
Or a retroactive way.
Or a retroactive way, exactly. Because those land rights have been granted. Obviously, they have to be granted, but once they're granted, they're very difficult to take away because there is an immutable source of truth that says this land belongs to these people.
Right, okay. I've got a couple more questions, but I'm getting some really good questions from you guys. I'm sorry if I got this wrong, whoever you are, Willibalds, but it's a great question, a lovely name. The surname is even weirder, Mazkalinius. I don't know. Hi, thank you very much. I think this is particularly relevant to people that have lost their private key, right, when it comes to cryptocurrencies. If someone steals your private key, is that it for ever and ever and ever and ever?
Yeah. This is probably the biggest problem in crypto right now.
There's nothing that you can do.
No.
I mean, apart from find a piece of paper in the...
So this concept of private key security is something that is an ongoing problem above protocol layer, right? So you've got the protocol layer, and that is a way in which we can be certain of trust. But the security that is around the private key, there is going to be there's a custodial risk in that. And it's my belief.
What do you mean by custodial risk?
So if you hold it, then you have complete authority to do what is against that public key.
I see, okay.
Right? So there are lots of ways that you can improve the security of that. You can give that to custodial parties who look it after. So maybe we won't see banks in the future, but we will see trusted parties who look after our private keys.
Like a safe deposit box.
Right. Or
actually, that's quite a good idea.
Right. Or like there are more advanced cryptography techniques you can use, like Shamir secrets, where you can split up a key into lots of parts, and one part doesn't give you the authority. You need like 2, 3 parts to put it together, so that makes it harder to just steal it.
Like a nuclear button.
Like a nuclear button.
Awesome.
Exactly.
But I mean, when it comes to security, so I have a private key, right? I have a very small amount invested, blah blah blah. And I was so stupid. Someone said, I'll send you 2 Ether. So I sent them my private key by email, right? And the guy just came back and says, do you know how stupid you are? And I thought, well, just delete it, it'll be fine. So then I got really smart, right? So then I sent them my public keys, that was all right. And then about 4 different places on my computer, I put my private key, right? And then I put space in the middle, so that'll fox them, do you know what I mean? But then I realised one of the best things, when I lived in Goa for a while, there was a few gangsters and drug dealers there. So what they used to do to leave messages, they'd leave a message in a game, so you go into this cave, there'd be a message, meet me outside the back. But the other one was that they used to put it in their Gmail drafts. So it's not sent from your Gmail if you've got 2-step authentication. So that's what I'm doing to protect myself. Is that enough? What should I be doing, man? Has anyone else made that mistake? Sent their private key? Anyone? Oh, there you go.
It is a really interesting challenge, and I think that it's sort of beyond the protocol level challenge, and it's something that will be a problem that needs to be solved if we're going to go to mass adoption. And it is a problem that will be solved by several companies, and it will get to the point where we're comfortable with that. But right now, yeah, it's still an issue. Right,
okay. Another question here from a really interesting person, can't spell the name properly. Anonymous, someone out there? Anonymous. How could quantum computers affect the security of blockchains? Which is a killer segue, by the way.
This is a brilliant question. So
come on, give us a brilliant answer.
When quantum computers come into existence, we'll just get quantum blockchains.
Yeah. So the issue, there is an issue there, which is that if you have encrypted something and put it on a mutable ledger, if it was encrypted with a encryption algorithm that subsequently is broken by quantum computing, you can then go back and decrypt what was put onto the blockchain. So that is an issue. The problem with quantum computing is much like the uncertainty principles it works on, it's quite uncertain as to exactly how powerful it's going to be. So there's a range of possibilities, starting from the very probable to the sort of very large powers of probability improbable, that they will be able to break various aspects of the cryptography. There are quantum secure cryptographic techniques, but much like in cryptography, generally speaking, you don't want to use the latest and greatest. You kind of want to use the thing that is like 5 versions old because it's been proven and there's no holes in it, or there's less likely to be holes in it. So there is this this argument of, wow, we should go with quantum secure, but everyone's like, yeah, but these are really new algorithms,
Absolutely.
and there could be something really
Do you agree with
easy
that,
in
Chris?
it.
I mean, you're being a little bit more on the fence about it. It's more subjective question.
We have much bigger problems when this happens. Like Amazon's broken, bank security is broken, like everything is broken.
HTTPS is broken.
Like the internet is basically broken when this happens.
No, absolutely.
So security-wise, yeah.
So we have another question from Chris. Thanks, Chris, for having a really good name. Can you name one real example where blockchain is being used today? I mean, I've spoken about humanity and racehorses.
Sure, yeah.
Let Chris go first.
So my favorite example far is CryptoKitties. I know this is ridiculous, but it actually represents exactly kind of all the interesting aspects of blockchain. So if you don't know, there's this game, you need a browser plugin, MetaMask, in order to actually transact with Ethereum. But basically, you buy and sell and breed these cats, but all of this is on the blockchain. All of the history, all of the ancestorship, it's exactly like the racehorses.
And it broke Ether, right?
It basically, it took Ethereum to the freaking hills.
And now everyone's doing it.
So it's
Crypto
a
kiddies.
game, but it's a really interesting, fun use of the blockchain.
And do you think that's what might happen then? That we started off the internet with this intellectual series of knowledge and sharing, and it's ended up in this ridiculous cat-loving bollocks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think that's what might happen to the blockchain? It might start off with all nobly.
No, but I mean, like, it's a great way to get people into it. So,
Yeah. Okay.
So from there, I know there's just hundreds of companies trying to get those first, textbook use cases of blockchain going.
Yeah.
So Maersk, the shipping container shipping company, is using blockchain in its insurance. So one of the problems with insurance is how many parties are involved, and it takes a long time to actually get the insurance documents. So long, in fact, that often the ship has left port and arrived at its destination before the insurance is confirmed. Which is insane.
Awesome.
So Maersk kind of went along and went, well, this is stupid. We're going to do all the documentation on blockchain. And we're going to say that these parties, if they sign against these blockchain contracts, then we have the insurance. And they massively reduced the amount of time it took to confirm insurance. And that's a great use case for sort of back office efficiency.
Maybe InsurTech will be one of the ones that benefits it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, insurance as an idea looks like a blockchain entity in many ways.
It looks stupid. Insurance business in my life now that this is happening, right?
Yeah.
It just seems daft.
Yeah.
My insurance for my car's gone up from £240 to £471. I found out yesterday. How the fuck did that happen? I haven't hit anyone or killed anyone. It's war. We've got just to let you know that Piers, aka Darius, it's moving on to do a kind of expanding on these ideas on the LMT founder stage after this. So he'll be running off. This is why we've truncated this debate. So if you want to learn more, go and listen to him. Kind of closing off a little bit, talking about fake news and all that stuff. I'll be talking about it later on. Fake blockchain and true blockchain, right? What do you think is going to be the kind of proportions between it? Are you going to know what's fake? That sounds like a stupid question, doesn't it? I'll go back to someone here. We'll talk about that after. Andre, thank you very much. Last question, saved my arse. Do you see... Sorry. Do you see, I think there's probably a little bit of an obvious answer, but do you see any synergy between AI and blockchain? Or is that just like quantum computing, that's just a further layer of...
There's some interesting ideas around AI and blockchain. So I think the most interesting one I still just ponder is like kind of AI-driven organizations that have no owners, and they're made possible by blockchain. They have identities, they can do payments, they can do everything algorithmically. I just think it's a profound idea. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's...
As a really long-term future idea. If AI is going to automate everything, and we as human beings do not have a purpose, and we need a way of making sure that, reproduction. And we need a way of making sure that assets and income is distributed fairly amongst the population. Maybe an AI autocracy, an AI global ruler that decides exactly how assets and money is distributed
like
amongst
Flash
the
Gordon.
populace.
Some Ming the Merciless. Anything to add before we go home?
That was brilliant.
Also, listen, I'd like to thank you for your questions, especially the person I couldn't pronounce their name. If you want to go and see Piers, he's upstairs. I've learnt a lot. I could talk to you guys for years. So a round of applause to my panelists. Thank you very much.